Hello and welcome to our Easterisode for 2020 here at Pros. This year, we will join a young woman as she seeks to become something more Christlike. Easter for us all is a bit strange this year, but I certainly hope that a short story might bring up your spirits wherever you are and whether or not you actually celebrate the day or participate in the religion. We will be coming back together next week for the full episode 103, but for now, let's enjoy this, well, how about we call it this non-standard Easter story? And with that, let's get to the tale, shall we? This week, for our Easter special, we have Lady Jesus Beyond the Magdalene. Enjoy. Lady Jesus Beyond the Magdalene, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. The women in the story of both the birth and the resurrection of Jesus always take a back seat, oddly enough. Even at the times they are in the driver's seat, pushing the story toward major places in Christ's life. The Christmas story is a fantastic example of this. Though Mary, Jesus' mother, is just that, giving virginal birth to the Messiah, somehow Herod, the Magi, the angels, the shepherds, Joseph, King David, Caesar Augustus, and Quirinius get better mention and billing than Mary herself. Even the animals in the manger seem to garner more attention in various Christmas plays and nativity scenes than the Queen Mother herself. Maybe this is because the poor woman kept quiet, simply choosing to treasure up all these things and ponder them in her heart, rather than create a big kerfuffle over having just performed a pretty kick-ass miracle unto itself. Birthing a child is a big deal, period. Birthing God's one Son come down to save the souls of all the world? Most would agree. That could use just a touch more recognition. These thoughts are what came to Ambrosia's mind every Thanksgiving. Why Thanksgiving? Why, that's when the Christmas play was cast at church, of course. She knew that, as the eldest of the teens that were still part of the youth program but too old to be a child, she would be cast as Mary. Every single time. This strange real estate she owned always troubled her. She wasn't mature enough to have her parents not worry when she was out past midnight, but she was mature enough to portray a wife and mother? The world could shorten Ambrosia to the seemingly tangential Nessa, the name of a cute little ruddy-faced child, though she admittedly enjoyed and perpetuated the nickname. But she was to be this revered woman. It all just seemed sort of off to her. She thought that maybe, just maybe, after having graduated and begun her first year at the local university, her casting might change this last Christmas season. She'd pushed to be the angel of the Lord. She remembered that, in the now dim past, the angel of the Lord had once been played by a beautiful blonde woman that everyone agreed was perfect for the part, even if everyone could see right through her white robe on the night of the first performance. Needless to say, that particular performance was rather impactful to all in attendance for a multitude of very disparate reasons. Nothing like some spotlights to make a sheer white robe go translucent. Nothing like some breasts mid-play to spice up an otherwise mediocre run-of-the-mill nativity play scene. The point was, though, that if a buxom blonde gal, half bearing her tits to the church, could be the angel of the Lord, so could she. At least Nessa would have the good sense to wear something under her thin white angel robe so as to make it a bit less revealing. Surely the shepherds weren't sore afraid because they got an eyeful from the angel those millennia ago. For this Christmas's play, wonder of all wonders, Nessa had been Mary again. People told her it's because that she had jet black hair and blue eyes, a rather popular painting of Mary's look across the world for some reason. She was pretty sure Mary would have had the black hair, yes, but definitely not the blue eyes. So, as the angel of the Lord was once again glorying in her ardent, avid sexuality while delivering the good news to the shepherds watching their flocks by night, Nessa had been sitting, dejected, and to the side, out of the spotlight in every way. Now, she found herself with another opportunity having just been plopped in her life. Just this last Sunday, the Sunday after the New Year's celebration had come and gone, an Easter cantata had been announced. For the first time ever, Futuan First Baptist Church would be staging a telling of Jesus' last days, crucifixion, death, and resurrection, all mishmashed up with what would no doubt be some impassioned, if a bit repetitive and humdrum, modern praise music. The tryouts and casting for all parts, acting, musical, and technical support, would be held 2 weeks from the announcement that Sunday, giving everyone enough time to prepare for the auditions and giving those chosen to be a part of the cantata just about 3 months to get fully prepared. As she exited the church that day, Nessa heard everyone buzzing about the event already. This was a first, so it was going to be a big deal in the small community. Plus, the church body absolutely adored anything theatrical and anything and everything musical. Put the two together, and this was going to be an evening for the ages. Sister Martha was rattling away about the costuming. She was edgy for an older lady and was already thinking about how to zazz up the often boring outfits for the subject matter. Miss Constance's little ones were running up and down the aisles, howling about how they couldn't wait to be soldiers in the play. Those children did have a mean streak, but who celebrates being the Romans in an Easter production? Then, Brother Earl told her how excited he was to see her get to play one of the Marys, either reprising her role as Mary, Jesus' mother, or as the, in his words, all-important Mary Magdalene in the play. Then, Sister Jess said the same thing. Then Sister Catherine, then Brother Johnny. Though many of the others commenting mentioned that she didn't have enough salt or seasoning to play Mary Magdalene. By the time she made it to her car to head toward her parents' house for their ritualized weekly Sunday lunch, Nessa was heated to the point of being downright livid. Already, she had been limited as to what role she could play. It was either the easily written off and sidelined Mother of God, or a whore, albeit a reformed, revered whore. But a whore nonetheless, and even that sultry part was being said to potentially be too much for her. God knew the angel of the Lord would be ravenous for the part. According to damn near everyone in the congregation, she was set to be a second fiddle to every boy in the church. Again. That Sunday's lunch passed in a haze. Hollow passing the green beans and the tried and true how was your last week / what's on the docket for next week babble. All she could think about was that blasted cantata. As she absent-mindedly grazed, a notion came to her. Then that notion became an idea. The idea became her plan. She wouldn't be going out for one of the Marys for the cantata. No. She would be going out for the big part itself, the whopper. Nessa would audition for Jesus. The rest of the lunch went by in a blur. The afternoon zipped by too, afternoon naps and family time being foregone as she studied her lines as per the New Testament. Evening service was also there in a way faster than she could think. In 2 weeks' time, Nessa would change the face of Futuan First Baptist Church forever. She reveled in the thought. She would be the rebellious girl who upended the sexist order of things. She would be the gorgeous girl the boys would have to stamp down their attraction for while she played their Lord and Savior. She was craving more, and she would have it. 4 days before the tryouts, Nessa made an error of judgment. She told the son of the youth minister, Brother Elliot. Brother Elliot's snitching son, Michael, immediately cackled at the idea of her being made Jesus. Everyone knows a woman can't have the lead of an Easter play. And ran about telling anyone and everyone who would listen about Nessa's plan. She would have killed the little bestial boy. Yes, he was only 4 years younger than her, but his immaturity soured her on any notion that there were redeeming qualities to Michael. The youth group always said to mind your thoughts, but there in the sanctuary with church service still winding down, Nessa had thoughts of violence come unbidden. She'd seen her grandmother wring chickens' necks, and she reckoned doing so to that cherubic mini-demon wouldn't be so terribly difficult. Normally, thoughts of violence weren't what cropped up in her mind. Her cravings weren't all for fame and recognition and a place of better prominence in the church, after all. But those cravings would be particularly problematic if they reared their distracting heads amidst her bid for Easter time power. Michael's letting that genie out of its bottle really caused a ruckus. Brother Elliot asked her to step aside to his office with him, which she did. In there, he explained to her just how problematic having a lady Jesus would be. Historical accuracy issues, church tradition, costuming, the realities of her body. That last bit seemed a bit too much like a not-so-veiled, if slightly inappropriate compliment, but Nessa shook it off. After that, Brother Elliot asked the choir director and de facto Easter cantata maestro, Brother Jessam, in to further counsel Nessa. Brother Jessam backed up everything Brother Elliot had said. The realities of her body came up again, with a bit too much emphasis this time around. They really did seem to have hang-ups about this, and their eyes darted down, and then back up to her eyes. Far too much for comfort. But Brother Jessam also came in with an offer in hand. Nessa would play Mary Magdalene rather than Holy Mary, the Mother of Jesus. She would have free reign over costuming and even be allowed to ad-lib some of the lines. Nessa as Mary Magdalene wouldn't cause the same sort of confusion as Nessa as Jesus. Impure thoughts regarding the Magdalene were all but natural, after all, maybe even scriptural. You couldn't say that about the Lord. Brother Jessam even said that he'd add in some bits to beef up the role, just so Nessa knew they were serious about the level of congregation-wide stardom she'd achieve. Just like the angel of the Lord did, they had said while bobbing their heads enthusiastically. Nessa gave them a thanks but no thanks, told them that she'd still be going out for Jesus, and let them know once and for all that she was craving more than to be second fiddle to some boy for a 19th year in a row. This would be her year, and she would take the women of the church beyond the angel of the Lord, beyond Mary, Mother of Jesus, and beyond the Magdalene. She wasn't backing down. Period. On the evening of the auditions, Nessa ensured she was looking the best she could for the part. She had done a self-bronzer that made her porcelain skin a deep olive tone. Her black hair was down and unwashed, making sure it looked scraggly like that of a bedraggled prophet preparing for the end of his earthly run. The hair and the bronzer worked wonders, and her naturally dark and defined eyebrows gave her a haunting look, though her cerulean meets sapphire eyes shone out of that dark-on-dark visage, piercing any ideas that she was, in truth, of anything but very Caucasian parentage. She thought of buying some color contacts online to make her eyes a deep brown, but she'd run out of both time and money, not that she ever had much of either. Church that morning had been very unusual in all the best ways. The sermon was what it always was, loose interpretations of the Bible that Nessa's expanding education was increasingly being called to question. The songs were the same songs, the people were the same people, save one. A visitor that morning who sat alone intrigued her. She was in her central pew. The visitor sat alone off to the far right near the front. She could see him in profile, and he looked utterly foreign to her. At the end of the service, and once the offering was taken up, Pastor Jennings made the announcement that auditions were being held that evening in lieu of the Sunday night service, releasing the congregation after he'd said as much. The snickers and sidelong glances Nessa received as people were shuffling to the exit, though, let her know that the service and the auditions were not foremost on her brothers and sisters' minds. No, they all couldn't wait to see a girl try out for Jesus. And they would see her, too. Pastor Jennings had Brother Jessam and Brother Elliot set up the streaming camera so the whole church family could take part without having to leave their homes via Facebook Live. So very kind of them all. As Nessa was gathering up her Bible and cardigan she'd tossed down on the pew beside her, as well as gathering up some steel for her spine, since she'd have to run the gauntlet of questioning eyes, false well-wishings, and general loads of unwanted attention to get out to the car in one darkened and made straggly piece, the stranger approached her. He introduced himself as David and said that he was from out of state. Futuan First Baptist Church had been his grandmother's home church, and he'd come back just to revel in the memories and remember his grandma. Despite being a visitor, David had already heard of the would-be Lady Jesus. To that, Nessa blushed uncontrollably. But David immediately put her at ease, if causing her to blush more, by telling Nessa how amazing he thought her stand was and how he wished he could stick around for the auditions. Unfortunately, his job was pressing him to get back. He did say that he might be back for the cantata itself. That made Nessa's blush burn all the deeper still. The other pleasantries were lost on her, and she felt her knees almost buckle when he told her it was a genuine pleasure to meet her, wished her all the best, extended his hand to hers, and, instead of shaking it or fist-bumping or any variation of that greeting, kissed the back of her hand so gently, she almost thought he'd simply made the motion rather than putting lips to skin. After that, the strange David disappeared into the flow of people heading out of the doors, the exchange lasting all of 3 or 4 minutes and having gone unnoticed by everyone at church that day. Nessa felt on fire. Had she been her usual shade of fleckless ivory, her blush would have made her look like a neon sign of embarrassment. Thanks to the bronzer, she could hide in plain sight. As she exited the church that day and walked out to her car, she was aswirl with emotions. Sister Martha was questioning how to costume a Lady Jesus. How could they possibly allow for the usual thin, tattered robes to do when this girl had those breasts and those hips? Miss Constance's children were running up and down the rows of cars, howling about how they would kill Jesus worse if he were a lady. A mean streak and sexism seemed to both run deep in them. Brother Earl did not say a word about either of the Marys or her decision to seek the lead role in the cantata. Sister Jess was mostly silent as Nessa passed, though she whispered something about a woman's body not being on display. Sister Catherine didn't say one word or even look her way. Neither did Brother Johnny. The entire swarm of congregants either stayed silent or were abuzz with how Nessa was shaking the foundations of the church and its traditions and the Easter cantata and the community and the Bible and the faith and her family and... Well, it didn't matter. She tuned most of it out, rather lingering on David's light kiss to her hand and reveling in the nest of hornets she'd kicked up by even deigning to try out for the part of Jesus. In 5 hours, she would face all these naysayers, both virtually and live in living color, and she would seek to change the world for the better in her own humble way. And she was pretty sure Jesus would smile about that from up in heaven. He always was a rebel, and ne'er-do-well himself after all. A political revolutionary, a friend to whores and murderers, an apostate of what most would have said was the true path. Yeah, he would approve of her auditioning to play him. Yes, there would be hips and tits where there were none and lightning blue eyes where his were brown, but she would carry his message better than anyone else could. She could do that much. She would do that much. For now, though, Nessa climbed into her car, head held high and right hand smelling of a handsome stranger's cologne, to head toward her parents' house for their ritualized weekly Sunday lunch. Thank you for listening to Lady Jesus Beyond the Magdalene, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. All sounds that you've heard come from YouTube's free audio library, freesound.org, or are my own creations. Those that are not my own creations are being used under CC 01.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. I truly appreciate you joining me for a little bit of an Easter celebration, if it was a little bit strange compared to what most were expecting. For those who celebrate, a very happy Easter to you all. I hope it brings brightness and light and faith, even amid all this dark stuff. For those that don't celebrate, I'm sending you love from across the airwaves and across the digital landscape. As always, please love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, forever and always, stranger than fiction. Happy Easter. I'll see you next week for episode 103. Thanks for listening.